Hi, I'm Rebecca Murphy, and this is Engineering Unblocked. On today's episode, I'm talking to Iccha Sethi, the new VP of Engineering at Vanta. We'll talk about taking stock of an engineering organization as a new VP, just how technical engineering managers need to be, and her work at Github, Atlassian, Invision, and now Vanta, all focused on operational health. So, Iccha, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm excited to be talking to you.
Yes, I think I saw you on stage at a lead dev or something like that in the past, and I hunted you down, especially when I saw that you got this new role. So definitely interested to hear. I'm always interested to talk to VPs about like what is their job even, and how do they spend their days. So thank you so much. Can you start by just telling me though a little bit more about what is Vanta? I have heard of it, but I could not have explained what it does. So, but that's your job now. So
yeah. So Vanta is a trust management platform, and what we basically offer is automated compliance, unified security management program, and streamlining security reviews. And kind of to break it down, what we help you get like your SOC 2 certification or your ISO certification through like automated monitoring. And we kind of take it a step beyond that and say you want to just have like your governance, risk, and compliance program, which is basically you want to maintain the security posture of your entire organization, not really related to any of these compliance frameworks. We kind of help you do that too. And then we have this whole entire other suite of products called Trust Center, Questionnaire Automation, and Vendor Risk Management. And they kind of are associated with, as a customer, if you want to establish trust or like share your security posture with your customers, it kind of enables you to do that. And that's why we have like our AI sprinkling to like kind of reduce the number of hours taken to like respond to customer questions and stuff like that.
This seems like it's in a class of companies that have emerged over the last few years because this stuff is hard, and building up the expertise in your own company is hard. How old is Vanta, and what's kind of been its journey?
Yeah, good question, and very time consuming.
Yes.
Vanta is roughly 5 years old, but it's done really well. So it's beyond like its product market fit stage. We have over 100 million plus in ARR, 7,000 plus customers, and we're very much focused on like growing the needs and meeting the needs like of our upmarket customers. So very much in that next phase of the journey. Yeah.
5 years is a pretty good time to have put together.
Yeah. I saw some stat about like it's a very small percentage of companies get to this stage. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in 5 years or ever also, that too. So you started at Vanta just in the last 6 months or so, right?
Yes, that's right. I've been here 5 to 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to hear about what is it like to show up to, like, you're obviously experienced in tech. This is not your first tech job. But if I'm correct, you haven't had a VPE job before. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, previously I ran engineering for a suite of products at GitHub, actions, code spaces, packages, pages, and NPM. But then Vanta is running all of engineering, which is more responsibility for sure. Yeah.
So what do you do? Like, what is your job when you show up to a role like this?
Yeah, my first, few weeks coming in or months coming in, settling in, was the first thing is understanding the business strategy. Is like truly understanding like, hey, where is the company? What are its challenges, and where does it want to go? And then taking a stock of like, what's the state of engineering? What are its challenges, and is it set up to meet that business strategy? Yeah, to actually deliver that. So very much this role is focusing on the big picture and then being able to zoom in and seeing if like what we have laid out will support that big picture. And so that's what I've been doing, and kind of like coming up with a plan to like where we should course correct or take on new initiatives or change existing initiatives to make sure we are tracking along with the business strategy.
We talked about like Vanta, the business is well beyond product market fit and is in that kind of accelerated growth for the upmarket customers. What are the challenges on the engineering side? What you're, well, I don't know. I was going to say, what you're building, but yeah, what are some of the challenges that engineering is having to take on? Because that 5-year trajectory is a short one. That's a very short time to mature an engineering organization. So
great observation there, Rebecca. So from an engineering culture perspective, like we have an amazing mission-driven culture. Like all the engineers are like, hey, I know where the business is going, and they have very high bias for action. But we're also in the process of scaling, right? Like I mentioned, going up market. So we're in this point of growth where like we also have to be mindful about doing things right and creating a sustainable architecture to build on. But that doesn't mean that we can take a back seat on that high bias for action. So it's a good balance striking that we have to do, that we're continuously delivering value to our customers. And at the same time, we're building a sustainable architecture that you're not going to have to rebuild the same things you built like 6 months ago. So, but I feel kind of fortunate, like having seen like other companies I've worked at, like Invision, go through this journey, like also seen bigger companies like Github and Atlassian, that it's like a totally like solvable problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I really am just thinking like 5 years is such, a 5-year timeline at GitHub is very different from a 5-year timeline at a startup, right?
Yes, very different. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the kind of cultural challenges, that whole bias to action, but we have to build something that will keep working? I guess this goes into your operational health background, where that's probably why you're there, is my guess, is because you have some experience with how do we build things that keep working. So how have you brought that? I know operational health has been kind of like a thing that has been kind of a focal point of your career. How are you bringing that into Vanta?
Great question. So I have, spent a lot of time, years, maybe decade at this point, thinking about engineering excellence, operational excellence, all that kind of stuff. So like, I'll take a little bit of a step back and give you a little bit of my philosophy on this, and then we can kind of dive into it. Okay. So there's like engineering excellence and there's operational excellence in my head. Like that's my mental framing. Engineering excellence is how you build things. Are you writing clean code? Are you writing tests? And then you go on to operating this thing, which is this service running in production well? Is it causing incidents? And obviously there's like a close feedback loop and cycle between the two. And then operational health has different elements to it. It's like, are you available? Are you causing incidents? Are you firing off a ton of noisy alerts? What is your data maturity? Do you have the right metrics? Is your product and architecture built with operational health in mind? Kind of stuff. And how are your people and processes plugged into supporting this? And I know there's a lot of these elements to operational health, but a combination of all of these kind of determine where you're on the maturity journey for operational health. Like, I also divide this into almost 3 levels. Level 1 is you're extremely reactive. This basically, for example, your customers are telling you you are down. And you're like, oh shit, who should I ping? Should I ping Bob from this orange team, or should I ping Alice from the green team? I don't know. That's clearly not a priority. And level 2 is you're a little bit mature, you have some things in place, I call it the adaptive stage, where you're learning from your incidents, you're setting up processes, you know what an SLO is, for example. And then you go on to level 3, which is you're proactive. This is businesses depend on my product. You fire an alert, and maybe there's an automatic remediation, which, restarts your Kubernetes containers or whatever. Now, going back to the companies I've worked at, different companies based on where they are in their business journey require different levels of maturity. If you don't even know your product market fit, you're probably don't care about like proactive remediation, right? You're still trying to make money as a business. Versus if you're a GitHub, every minute you're down, your customers are probably losing money because they can't deploy. Yeah. And so you got to aim to be at a level 3 there. And then I look at companies like Vanta, we clearly can't afford to be level 1. And level 2 is a sweet spot, aiming for like some spikes. And level 3, because that's the type of leader I like to be. But so that's the rough framing. And that was also like taking stock of like, okay, here are areas where we are doing well. Here's where we can like have some spikes or have more investments to mostly set us up for like that upmarket customer journey.
Your thing has been operational health. My thing has been platform teams. Lots of overlap there. But,
yes.
I'm curious with operational health, because one of the things you see with platform teams is that they don't form until you really need them. And maybe that's a little like, maybe if they had started a year ago, that would have been better. How does what does that tend to look like in an organization when it comes to operational health? Is it inevitably like you're fixing the past, or do some people get it right and they're like putting this stuff in place?
It's so funny you're asking this question. I'm smiling so broadly because like one of the things I have advocated for, I'm trying to do as soon as I started Vanta, is growing our platform team. We had one, which is great, but like definitely investing more in it. So, and when I started this, I also like surveyed like a bunch of other companies. Like there's like some companies who have had very technical first founders who believed in a strong platform first foundation and starting from there. And then there are some companies which are kind of like what you described, which are like, till the need arises, we won't create one. And they are always like, wish I had created this a year ago. And that's why I'm like, okay, the more we can get ahead of like starting with the platform team, of course, like you don't start with an overbloated, like where it's 50% of your organization, right? Like that's more like when you're at like a scale level of maturity, but having 0 means each team is resolving the same problems. They're instrumenting repeatedly the same thing. So having a centralized platform team who can like think holistically about these problems in partnership with the product teams, I think is critical to operational health. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also interesting. You keep talking about like GitHub, and obviously they need to be at level 3 all the time. Although even there's GitHub, the public facing thing, that needs to be at level 3 all the time. But I can also imagine there's plenty of stuff inside GitHub that does not need to be at level 3 all the time. So, and you pointed out that maybe not everything at Vanta needs to be at level 3 because it's not that same level of criticality. How do you make that decision? Like what is the criteria for saying, actually, we can't screw up this?
I think that again ties back to your business strategy and your product very much, right? So how heavily is this product or feature used by this customer? And every minute or second it is down, what is the impact to your business? I'll give you a fun example. Last Friday, the Chipotle app was down. And my husband texted me saying like, oh, the Chipotle app is down, so I'm just going to order a burger. And they lost money for every second they were down and a customer couldn't place an order. So it's about like understanding what is the impact to my customer. And that's one element of it. And the other element of it is the immeasurable is how much customer trust are you losing by them coming to your platform or your product and not being able to do what they're doing. Like, even if it's not super critical, like, okay, if I don't do this operation, it's not the end of the world, but it's still annoying that you are down for me all the time. And that those paper cuts build up to causing churn eventually, or leaving a negative experience and feel for your product. So even if something isn't like a tier 1, so to answer your question, like, we define criticalities in terms of like tiers of product features, and the higher tiered features have more business impact and hence should have like a greater level of operational excellence associated with them, which means like higher uptime, less downtime, more auto remediation, etc. associated with them. But that doesn't mean that you should still have a high bar for your tier 3, in my opinion, because those things add up for your customers. Yeah.
How do you talk about, in this also platform teams, how do you talk about the business value of getting this stuff right? Because like churn is such a lagging indicator, and also the attribution for churn is hard. And in a zero sum game, if you are spending engineering time on this, then you're not spending engineering time on something else. Even though, of course, I know that over the long run, that like I understand. But how are you communicating that to maybe non-technical leaders who want to see more things, like built for the customer?
And you're absolutely right? It's not one thing or the other. Everything is a trade-off. Like if you over pivot on one axis, you are giving up on the other axes to some extent because time is fixed and resources are fixed. So one fun thing we do at Vanta is every time there's an incident, a bunch of people get automatically pulled into that incident channel, and it includes our product owners. Our product leaders are in that. So they are seeing what's happening to the customers or to our engineering resources. And so it's always a conversation of different things like, hey, how many engineering hours are spent in this area, which is having a lot of incidents? Hey, the engineers are getting distracted. Every week, there's at least one incident in this area, which kind of adds up to like X amount of hours, which if we did a one-time investment could mean that, it could be put back towards like building product features. Or it could be like, this area is doing fine. There's not that many issues. And if we don't really build this feature, we are going to lose this segment of the market, or this customer really wants it, the renewal's coming up. So it's not a binary conversation. There's multiple data points of what tech debt, not all tech debt is bad, like what tech debt is acceptable, what is the situation in the business, how much engineering resources and time are spent, can there be other teams helping them or not? And you have to have this conversation of trade-offs. The other thing we talk about is like, we can't do everything all at once too. Like, how do we balance moving the roadmap ahead with engineering efforts? So we might rotate out our focus areas to make sure like this progress made in different directions. One of the things I told my company when I started is like, as I think about the engineering strategy in lieu of the business strategy, also my hope is that we've been smart and strategic enough that we don't go like 5 years down the line and be like, oh shit, I screwed up and I have to rebuild everything. Because I've been at plenty of companies where you just keep like accumulating that to a point of like nothing but a big rewrite will solve it. And I look back and be like, if only those decisions were made differently. And I hope that's my hope here is like to do things slightly differently where you can still move the business ahead and take more like an iterative strategy towards building things right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Someday we'll get it right. Someday.
Yeah.
It's all so easy in hindsight.
Yeah.
You just said something interesting about not all tech debt is bad, and I totally agreed. Talking about incidents, kind of using that language, like incidents are often perceived as bad. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm just curious for you to talk about like how do you talk about incidents at Vanta, and how do you create a culture where, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Incidents shouldn't be bad. Like incidents are information that let us improve. So how are you kind of driving that kind of culture at Vanta?
First of all, like we don't set goals for number of incidents. Like for example, we'll measure how many incidents happen every month, and we will talk about them, but we never like goal ourselves against this should be the number of incidents, because I think once you start goaling, then people's behaviors are altered. And I actually do agree with you wholeheartedly that incidents are not bad. Like we're all analytical people to some extent because we are in this field, right? Like to me, an incident is a symptom or is a data point that something is happening in your system that you should go investigate more. And, a Sev 1 incident, which is very different from like a severity 3 incident. And or an incident which lasted 3 hours is very different from an incident which lasted a few minutes. And there's so much like information and wealth and data in each incident. And the more that you can set the tone that like, hey, these are not bad. These are just interesting data points for us to evaluate as a team and dig into to give us further insights and information on what we should go tweak or not tweak is super helpful to set that like very open environment. And the other thing is like, even if the incident was because of like a human error, I strongly believe it's not the human's fault. Like we are all human and human are fallible. Like the fault is depending on a human to get this thing right. Because you're always going to have new engineers. You're always going to have, different levels of experience and expertise. And instead our conversation should be, how do we automate out of this, instead of like, no, we should go educate people more, which is, yes, sure, but that is not a foolproof solution. So incidents are not bad. They're a wealth of information. Yeah.
So what do you measure? You mentioned that you're not measuring incidents, and that's good. I'm curious if you mentioned like customer reported incidents versus self-detected incidents. I'm curious how you feel about goaling around that, but in general, what are you setting goals around, and what are you measuring?
Yeah. So we are looking at percentage of incidents detected through automation. So which is basically what you described, which is self-detected versus customer detected. I think that's actually a good metric to have, because it's improving your muscle around observability and understanding your systems. And also a customer has better trust in you if they see something is wrong and they come see it on a status page versus status page is all green and they're experiencing an issue, right? So that's a good one to goal on. And then again, the amount of data and metrics depends on, again, the level of maturity of your company. So in general, I've measured uptime, which is what percentage of your time your website or your application is available to customers, but the operations that you have committed to. You can measure how many alerts are happening. So for example, if you have a high volume of alerts, digging into what the signal to noise ratio looks like, on-call burnout. In more sophisticated companies, instead of just incident numbers, we have mentioned incident impact, which is basically what was your time to detection plus mitigation times the percentage of customers impacted. And we would create like this impact score back at GitHub. So this treated like, okay, no two incidents are alike, but you can like measure the impact to customers over there. And then we had several other like input indicators we would measure, like the types of incidents, the root cause, like all this metadata to like analyze trends over like, oh, we're having more incidents related to dependencies. So we should be resilient against our dependencies and going into like second order metrics.
So how do you've had a series of incidents that are all because of dependencies, or they're all because of unknown services, or they're whatever. So many reasons that you can have incidents. How do you prioritize strategic remediation? How do you figure out where to spend your time? And how do you even identify that there is a strategic remediation to some of these issues?
Yeah. No, great question. I think starting with your second part, like how do you identify, right? So I think a lot of companies are great at setting up postmortems or incident reviews where you review each week's incident. And sometimes you don't go deep enough there and talk about the systemic issues, because a lot of times engineers feel that's out of their control. So let's just talk about what's within our control. And they kind of leave out talking about what's not within their immediate control, but still would be like a beneficial thing for the organization to go address. So that's one, is actually talking about that in that incident review and acknowledging that that's that. Then the second is stepping out from the weekly incident reviews and having some kind of cadence of analyzing trends. Like, for example, I have a leader within Vanta who does monthly reviews of trends. I had one of the principal engineers back at Github who did quarterly review of trends. And these trends are like your insights, which like paint your month over month data. How are we doing? Are we improving? Are we not improving? Are there like this cluster of incidents we continue to see related to one theme or this real reason? And that's your first step, just identifying it. Even getting good at that, if you are there, kudos to you as an organization. Yeah, good job. Now, the second thing is hard, right? Like, I think over there, you have to like form like a problem statement around like, hey, this is the problem and this is the impact of this problem. And here is evidence related to this problem, which is your list of incidents. And if we had solved it, it would have like helped us in XYZ. Like, so I like being data driven. And so if you go and pitch saying, hey, I just need to refactor this without any like goals or impact, it's unlikely to be funded by any leader. But instead, taking a very like data driven approach to the problem and being like, hey, this initiative needs to be funded for these reasons, and here's the impact it would have, and this is the potential size of the solution, is the first step towards like defining that problem statement. And then comes planning time. Like, you as an engineering leader, along with your product counterparts and your design counterparts and your leadership team, now have this like well-defined problem solution with the impact described that you can weigh kind of like against, you know, the product features who have like a good amount of like impact described too, to be like, what are the trade-offs you make? And if you've done a good job of defining this with data, your product leaders will understand and appreciate what you're trying to advocate for more. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've always struggled with this because we had a word for this a couple of jobs ago called non-events, like trying to demonstrate that if we do this work, this thing will not happen.
Yeah.
And that's always like, but will some other bad thing happen? Like, it's always such a hard thing to quantify the value of fixing something because it might happen again versus some other thing that might happen again. And so I think it's great what you're saying about looking at incidents to provide that data of what this has cost us so far. Does that tend to be enough to move the conversation forward, or is there still skepticism of like, yeah, but that's not going to happen again because we learned our lesson?
It depends, right? Like, so a lot of times maybe the small efforts buy you enough time, but sometimes it's clearly not enough. And it's the whole, like, what's the likelihood of this happening again? And what's the impact of that happening again? If ever anyone's maintained a risk register in the organization, this is another way to do this, is to classify this as a risk with the likelihood and impact. And then as a leadership team, reviewing your risks that you choose to mitigate or not. And I believe that we're all in here for like the good of the business, right? Like, be it you're a product functional leader or a design functional leader, or no matter what function you run, and ultimately having an open mind about all these things impact the business in different ways, and we're here for the business to be successful, is like a good mindset to have. And sometimes you don't prioritize it and it happens, and then you learn from it, and the next time you have a different perspective.
True enough.
Yeah.
I do think so much of this is getting, like you said, getting everyone thinking about like, what is the business impact of this versus that. I'm curious how you, or whether you pull in kind of non-prod eng roles into incident conversations. And prod eng roles, I'm just generally in like product engineering program, that kind of thing. But do you get other people involved in these conversations, and what's their role?
Yeah, support. Support currently reports into me at Vanta, and and I have an amazing support leader, and our organization is actually actively part of our incidents. Here, they are they help us with incident comms and communicating with customers because clearly they're better at it than stressed out engineers during an incident. And so they are also partners in more than one ways, right? So they are closer with the customers, if the eyes and ears, if they start seeing support tickets of a particular theme, they totally have the power to call an incident and get the right teams involved. And it was something similar at GitHub too. Like, even though support didn't report into engineering there, we had a very close relationship with engineering where if they saw a theme of incidents, they would, to support tickets, they would call an incident. And they would also be like our communication partners to some extent where, okay, it's not quite yet to call an incident, but here's the language. I think we want to communicate that a fix is coming or whatever. They're also good partners in operational health because I didn't mention this earlier, but support tickets is totally something I measure too as part of my operational health indicators. And I also measure the volume of support tickets, which get escalated to engineering, and if whether we are able to keep up with that volume within the given SLA or not. That is an indicator of, like, to some extent, bugs which get detected by customers or issues which get detected by customers. And if you're seeing that number grow, that means the quality of your product is shifting in the wrong direction, and it's a theme that you need to address. That's totally a part of, like, operating a healthy service. And so there again, very close partnership with my support leader to detect trends and issues, which informs, like, hey, you should be investing in this product area more. Sometimes that's an engineering fix, and sometimes that's either a product or a design fix too, because that means that area of the product is not very clear to customers for some reason. So I feel like having them in the loop, closely partnered, has been, like, super valuable.
That's so interesting that they're reporting into you too. Was that something that was already set up when you showed up, or?
Yes, that was set up when I showed up, and it's been great partnering closely with them. And I believe, like, whether they report into an engineering leader or not, like, that's a great, like, close relationship to maintain for any engineering leader. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at Stripe we definitely had, like, we call it the big red button. It was just a command in Slack. Well, there was an app we could go to, but you could also, I think, there was a command in Slack you could use to start an incident, and so everyone could do it. Cool. Like, anyone in the company could do it, and it would, like you said, summon everyone.
Yeah.
Sometimes there was some noise where it's like, that's not actually what we call an incident. That's just
yep. We've always had those too. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that trade-off of, like, it's worth it. You have those moments. It's worth it because then you have the eyes and ears of the whole business kind of thinking about what's working and what's not. And I really liked that. I really liked all the automation that we had. And again, that's a whole productized area now. You don't need to build it yourself. I loved that automation we had around that. We've talked a lot about what to do to do this well. What are some things that you see people screw up about operational health, despite their best intentions?
Good question. I think a little bit we spoke about when we were talking about incidents is, like, first and foremost, keeping them blameless and coming from, like, a place of curiosity and trying to remove human error as a valid, like, fix to fix humans and default to, like, systemic fixes wherever you can. The other is, like, just not having tough conversations. Like, people go through the motions of an incident review, but they're too hesitant to, like, point out another team or, like, another area. Like, they try to be nice versus, like, have the hard conversation in the incident review. And my advice to people there is, like, it's not about being nice or mean. Like, it's just about having, like, a very, like, systemic conversation, because similarly, it's not the other person's fault from that other team. It is the system. And we didn't have a systemic fix. And so really actually asking that tough question in that forum, people hesitate to do that. So really pushing them to go deep, have the hard conversation is one. The other extreme of this, I've seen this, is People will have like a great conversation and come up with like 20 items to fix from an incident. I'm like, you're not going to have time to do all 20. And I see them like carry over like month over month, sprint over sprint, because like they were clearly like very enthusiastic, which is great, but also being strategic about like which of these repair items will give us the most bang for the buck and committing to what you can over there. The other theme is feedback loops from incident postmortems or reviews into other parts of your system. We touched on planning earlier. The other one is also just like to how you build things. Like, for example, if you're having a set of incidents related to lack of tests, and you just go add a test to that area, that's not a systemic fix, like, right? So pushing back to like, oh, should this go back to our criteria for done, or should there be a big focus on improving testing? So really like pushing to tie it back to other parts of your software development lifecycle or your other parts of just like product or organizational lifecycle is key. And the last one I'll kind of mention is there are some fixes which are like related to data and instrumentation that people don't talk about, right? So for example, do you know what happened? I sort of know, but I don't have logs for it, or, like I don't have visibility into it. I think this is what happened. And they're like, okay, cool, whatever. Like, I mean, should we go add that data? Should we go add that instrumentation? How many customers were impacted? We don't know. Yeah, then how do you know what to prioritize? So like really going back to like adding data into your system to make better decisions too, is something I see sometimes people forget about.
One of the things that I've seen in incident conversations and operational health conversations is that having the VPE be in those conversations can be scary.
I try not to be scary, but I understand.
Yeah, you're clearly such a scary person. But it can be genuinely scary to be, called to incident. And I remember, again, at last job, like you would wait to find out, was your incident going to be part of incident review that week? And suddenly your whole week is ruined because you feel like you have to prep everything. So yeah, how do you like play a role in this process in a way that feels safe enough to the other people who are participating in the process?
It's a good question because it's a balance, right? You want to show people that you care, which, I do genuinely care about this topic. And at the same time, you don't want it to be intimidating to them. And so there's like a couple of different aspects to it. I have, other people in my organization actually run these incident reviews. They are on point for like getting them scheduled, inviting the people, having like the first set of questions, identify it to talk to it. And then a lot of the hard questions are actually part of the template too. Like, was this detected automatically? If not, why? And like, so they are just a part of the template that you should talk about. And opening the room up to first the other people to have these questions and conversations. And at the same time, like, I'm not afraid to jump in if I have to, like, and ask the question, because I think it's still very important to show that you care and you invested in this. But it's also important how you ask that question or the tone you use in having that discussion. So, for example, it's instead of being like, oh, why didn't you know this already? It's about like, would more training have helped, or would like coming from a place of curiosity in how you ask those questions. Sometimes it's helpful me being in the room because there's like uncertainty about certain topics, like, hey, who should own this? Should it be this team or that team? And it's good to have like some form of leadership in the room to be like, okay, either this is the answer or let's take an action item to address that answer. And as much as you make this like a routine. You just do it every week. It's a muscle. It's a non-event, and it comes from a place of curiosity. If you're like building fixes into that system, and at the same time having accountability, I'm hoping people view it as like we're all just trying to make our systems better. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole other podcast about the perils of being a leader and being seen as this like other and scary person. I've definitely talked to various leaders who've had to navigate. They're like, I'm still the same person I was when I was just like a baby engineering manager. But
yeah. It's so hard because you never get that honest feedback all the time, and you go up the ranks.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we talked about like as a leader, your responsibility in thinking about instance and instant review and operational review. What practices do you try to kind of push down to the teams around this so that it's not just, the big scary meeting on Thursdays where you sit before the VP and be interrogated. How do you push this down?
Great question. And I'll preface this by saying I think all teams should have this practice irrespective of whether you have like a global forcing function or not, is like just like weekly, as you do your on-call handoff, take a stock of how the week was operationally, right? Like what was your alert load like? What are the themes of alerts you saw? Did you have any incidents? Are there any interesting learnings from those incidents? Were there a number of support tickets? Were there any themes? And just doing like an operational mini review of that week as on call before you hand off to the next person, I think is a good like just muscle building for every team to do. And this ladders up nicely to like, back at GitHub, we had individual teams do that. And then this rolls up to the director level who runs this with, say, their managers and some engineers for like, let's take an operational review of themes across the organization. Oh, this team is drowning in alerts. Can we move people around to help them solve the systemic issue or whatever? And this rolled up again, even to like my level where I had multiple directors and senior directors roll up to me. And they kind of showed up representing their product areas. And this was also great because it was a forcing function for like all my reports, so for directors and senior directors, to like do that homework of understanding their area. And they would then be like, I learned this new thing about my space, or this number doesn't look right, which, you'd never realize that if you were just running a review versus you had to like do the homework for yours. And we kind of rolled it up at each level, which I think kept everybody like fully understood and invested in the operational state of and health of the entire organization.
It must be so good too to get those leaders in a room together talking about their operational health, because it can be, if nothing else, it can be comforting to know that somebody else is struggling too, or somebody else has the same challenge. Maybe you can work on it together.
100%. And we all learned from each other in that forum too. Like, oh, that's a neat idea. You are measuring business hours versus non-business hours alerts. Oh my goodness, we should all do that. And so we would learn things from each other all the time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we have been talking for a while now, so I'm going to let you go. Iccha, this has been great. So good. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. And I hope to cross paths with you at a future conference or some such.
Yeah, maybe a future lead dev.
Maybe, yeah. I'll be there in September. Yes, September.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a treat. And that's the show. Engineering Unblocked is brought to you by Swarmia, where we're helping the best software teams get better. We'll see you on the next time. Ooh, that was terrible. I'll fix it later. On the next time. That's not a thing.